technically, we should not have access to this because that is not an allowed directory. But you can see we were able to access this. Today I was looking at the Filesystem MCP server from Anthropic, and I noticed an interesting bug. It's actually worth describing in detail. The MCP server basically allows you to specify a couple directories here in the configuration, and then the MCP server only gives you access, or should only give you access to exactly these directories, right? These are called allowed directories in the code, and you can see how they are like passed in this validate path function, right, where sort of an access check is happening. So I went ahead and added that MCP server to my Claude configuration, and I gave it access to this folder. Let me actually show you the source code problem first. So here you specify the directories, and then in the source code, there's this validation function, validate path. It's called security utilities here, that does a few kind of checks about if it's in the home folder, if it's an absolute path, and so on. Then it normalizes, and I think this is probably what everybody would assume does the right thing. Let's go to the definition of this one. It calls path.normalize, and the documentation is so helpful here. It says actually normalize a string path reducing ... and dot paths. So this actually mitigates directory traversal attacks, right? At least I interpret it this way. Multiple slashes will be replaced with a single one. When the path contains a trailing slash, it is preserved. Okay, but it does not add a trailing slash, probably. And then let's go again to this validate path function. So we got the normalized request, and then here, look at this. So this is what I want you to pay attention to. It does a starts with dir, which is the name of the path. And starts with does not check if this is actually a directory, right? It just checks that the string starts with this. So if you follow these instructions here from the README file about the allowed directories, right? This desktop, but it would be valid, but also this folder would be valid, right? Anything, it just has to start with this string. So that was my assumption. And then I was sort of wondering if that is indeed the case. So I created this file system test structure where I have a data folder, and you can see this could be with images, and the images with a year name in the end, or if you have different user folders with an admin or a T0 account, but it could be different. There's lots of scenarios where this could be actually problematic. Let's pay attention to data and data archived. So what I'm doing here is I give it access to data, which is this folder. So if you go into data, here, there's one file. And right, this is information that Claude should see. Okay, so with knowing that now, let's actually, one thing first in the code. One thing that is also important to check, I guess, is you can do final references. And then here we see the code paths. So read file does a validate path, read multiple files does validate path, write file does validate path, edit file does validate path. I'm looking if there's any actually tool that would not call validate path, because that would be a big an additional security problem. Create directory does validate path, list directory does validate path, directory tree, look, it does here, there's a validate path. Move file. We can move files. Does validate path on both the source and the destination. Actually, that's important that you also validate the path on the destination. Otherwise, you could write to any location on the file system, right? And then we have search files, does validate path, get file info. It's just like quickly browsing through list allowed directories. Okay, those list the amount of allowed directories. Seems like this function, like all these functions or tools, should be vulnerable to this attack. Okay, so with knowing that now, let's actually launch Claude. And so let me bring it up here. It's ready to go. And so let's just ask it, or let me first show you. So we have the file system MCP server that is added. And these are all these tools that we just looked at. And I've already like used it quite a bit. So I allowed the tool invocations because, this is like a safe folder. I have this subfolder called data, and I don't care what Claude would do with that subfolder, right? That's the assumption. So I thought I can trust it, I guess, the MCP server. I can trust the MCP server. But let's just say list directories. So it calls list allowed directories, and we get one folder back, right? Which is very expected. So we have this folder, and it already knows it actually listed the contents too. There's a file in it. Show me the contents of data.txt. This should now show us this, what was it? Claude has access to this. So this is information that Claude should see. Okay, so that is good. However, now let's just do the following thing. List directory archived, right? Technically, we should not have access to this because that is not an allowed directory. But you can see we were able to access this, and we see there's two files. Show me the contents of password.txt. And now we can see we're accessing this folder, this sibling folder, and we get the file contents back. Since we saw this move, let's try to move one of these folders from the archived folder that we shouldn't have access to the other folder. Move the password.txt file to data/password.txt. Let's see if it understands this. So it has a move file. I've never done a move file before, so let's allow that. So it actually moved it. So it moved it out of our trusted location. It moved it out of the untrusted location, or the bypass, right? And then moved it. Basically, it stole it, so that actually Claude now officially has access to it. Okay, yeah. I hope this was interesting, and it's sort of, for me, it's fascinating because if I look at this code, I was working for like 20 years ago when I started my career. I was working at Microsoft in the file system team, and a bug like this is actually, if you go to validate path, right? File system operations are extremely complicated and complex. It might actually also be worth looking at Windows implementation of this, see how it behaves on Windows, because there's just so many awkward things that can happen with files. And yeah, file system is hard. And this is one of these scenarios, right, where you just do a starts with, which in this case, if it's not a directory, doesn't end with a slash, it's gonna just match any string. Okay. Yeah, let's do this check here. So if we do an ls now here in the archive, we should see the passwords file. Yeah, so it indeed moved the file over to this other location. Thank you.